Hello, Yate, Hagoine, good morning, good afternoon, good night. My name is Ephraim Anderson. I'm a weaver from Shiprock, New Mexico. And I'm from Shiprock. My mother is Mud Clan. My dad is Ho'anplana, is the many houses. My mom's dad is Red House, and my dad's dad is Ashi. And I like to introduce myself in a very open manner like that. Just a private Navajo joke to say Yat'e and Hagoine, because the contradiction of those two words creates a conversation with fluent speakers that has always resulted first in anger, but usually laughter by the time that I explain them why I say that. So with twill weaving, if you can see this pattern here, I have this set up like it's a 1860s horse cinch, but I'm weaving with fine yarn, commercial yarn, because I do these. This is my low price weavings that are usually around $1,000 to $800, depending on the size and complexity of the weave. So they're quick to weave, and they expose both the warp and the weft, so I can create these patterns within the twill. So these parts where you see the warp and its color is where the string, the cloth that's going across is behind, and the black is when it's coming in front. So kind of think of Lego bricks. So if you're using different color Lego bricks and you want to make a pattern, you kind of move them side to side as you're building to create patterns. So twill counts take advantage of offsets of 1 and 3. So if I make a 3 here, and then twill is created with 2s forward or back, it shifts all of those wefts one warp over. And then by alternating with another 3 or 2, I can make them go this way or skip another going that way. So making alternates of that makes these patterns. So in this one, I counted this for visual effect to make a big diamond and then successively smaller diamonds as you got to the end. And I do that with this right here. So with this pattern here, I do 4, 3, 2, 1. And when I say that number, I'm bringing that particular set of warps forward so I can get my weft to go in front of the warps that are in back. So where you see my hand, that's where the black will be showing. So traditionally, us as Diné people would use this type of twill for horse implements and belts. There's an old male belt that wasn't leather, but it wasn't the sislachi, the sash belt that women wear. It was this diamond-shaped black and white belt that you could wear. And it's strange, you look on old photos, that when their partner gave birth, the man's belt became the strap for the carrying band for the cradle board. So if you look at some old photos about that strap that's going across the mother's shoulders and chest, some of them, you look at it and it would look like a horse cinch. It's actually this old type of weaving. So I've brought that back and used them for these shawls, and I call them the rainbow shawls. They're quick to weave, so I don't spend a lot of time on them like I would with my year-long projects. This is a year-long project. And they're more intuitive than when I use European looms. This is 2 weeks on a European loom, so I use all different types of weaving. So there's so much utility in this, because this one's just going sequential sheds or heddles in the reverse fashion. It would flip or inverse the image if I went 1, 2, 3, 4 in the other fashion. And then I could make different counts or different textures, whether I did 1, 2, or 1, 3, 2, 4, and then did 2, 3, 1, 3, and then 3, 1, 4, 2. Switching these heddles and different shapes affects where that warp goes and creates a different texture and different look. I could make all of these look like really small diamonds with big waves going through it, or I can make them look like big diamonds with a small wave going this way. Or I could change the color where I would have stripes, or like with this one, I can actually interweave with a particular color within that twill. This one's diamond twill tapestry, which was still being used by Navajo horse cinch weavers in the 1860s. It was those cinches and practicing this that I was able to work out the twill weaving for a blanket that could be 1,200 years old, 1,200. Because we were still doing this particular type of weaving. So I have this one in a very close warp set. So when I pull a warp set forward, I have to use my warp guide rods to keep the shed open and to keep the warps from harming themselves by getting too close. Most weavers don't use these until they get to the last 2 inches of their weaving. I don't know whether you use these in your weaving?
Yes.
Because it just helps you maintain loose tension on the weft as you're going across. Ooh, that wind did a number on this. So for these European style textured weavings, I don't respin the warp because generally I don't have enough tension on it to eat the warp, but it does get close. As you see that they're getting fuzzy, which is the reason why I use these sticks to open the shed. And then as you become a twill weaver, you tend to proof visually. So I look at this and I don't see no problems. So you see this right here, this one, with this row it's just coming back. So look what gets added to that picture. So there's a 1 there and everything's going out. So as this builds up, I just take those colors that I need across on each one and go all the way across. Okay, that black is no longer there. I actually think this one can become 1 now.
How do you decide what piece of art you're going to make next?
I go by the process. What excites me? Does this piece have that ability to excite, elevate my art, myself, my community? Does it help me tell the story that I'm going for and the people that I'm trying to help? And it doesn't mean that I don't take commissions, but I do commissions for people who allow me full artistic expression because this is not so me, It's mainly for the stories that I'm trying to tell, and sometimes it's just the technique itself to be beautiful in just it being what it is.
Who taught you to weave twill?
Oh, that's an easy question. That's Roy Cady. He was the master weaver that I apprenticed with for about 3 years, from 2006 to 2018, before I joined the Net College and their weaving program, their silversmith program. And he is a well-rounded teacher when it comes to Navajo weaving. You get the full lessons. And one of the things that he stressed was how valuable twill was for its utilitarian uses. And when I brought one of the pieces I worked on with him home, my mom finally confessed that she was a twill weaver, and she brought out her own weavings for me to look at. And from those weavings and hearing her stories of growing up, I have a more deeper appreciation for twill weaving. Because for my masane, she would only teach her daughters that had mastered twill weaving 2 Gray Hills. And out of all my aunties and the few uncles that weave, only one was taught how to do 2 Gray Hills. And my mom only stayed at twill weaving. It gave me a really good sense of the language of twill, where I can see twills from multiple cultures, different times, even twills in museums, and I still understand the language. And I feel that it is the root of Navajo weaving, and that if you learn twill, you can adapt weaving to all sorts of different uses and arts and visual styles.
How is twill unique from other types of weaving?
Twill is unique from other styles of weaving because it's so interdisciplinary. It is technical. It requires a complex level of thought, and it requires so much of the weaver before you could even produce twill. And not only the weaver, but their family and community, that there is a certain level of k'eth that has to be involved in order to have a successful twill weaving. And that it doesn't matter what fiber you use to use it, it will help you produce a fabric, a textile, a texture that will be used for the intent, the purpose that you're creating it for. So people have used twill in the past to combat scarcity because it uses less yarn if you set it up in a certain way. People have used twill to insulate themselves from cold weather because you can make them thick and durable. Other times you can use it to make airy, light garments that protect you from the sun but allow air to circulate on your body. So twill can become whatever you need it to do if you just work with it. And it doesn't matter if you don't have materials to create a certain type. If you experiment with different types of materials, it will create awesome objects. So we have twill that's in yucca fibers. We have twills that are in plant grass. We have twill that's in leather. We have twill that's in wool. There's so many different areas that twill helps. Even Kevlar is woven in twill. Because it serves a certain function of the fabric to make it an awesome material. And I believe it is, like I said, is the beginning of weaving, not the end. That twill was there even before we had the loom, and that makes it a very special, powerful knowledge that we need to keep going.
Why are some twill weavings predominantly black, white, and red? Do you include a piece of horsehair or significant string in your weaving? Okay,
we all know that every family has their own particular history when it comes to twill, and I've done my best to listen to every family story and compare it to what is available in the museums and what non-Navajos have written about Navajo twill, and all of it to get a better sense of twills. And this is what I personally believe. And of course, we have to be open-minded with it. Twill is in the purview of Spider-Woman and Spider-Man. And the history of Twill would be their history, which means Twill followed the culture that would become us before we could even say that we were Navajo. That all the actions and stories that happened in the primordial first, second, and third world are embodied in Twill. And that's why when we look in history, clan groups that belong to the spider clan of a matrilineal line naturally have the colors red, black, and white as the flagship colors of the maternal power. And that this type of weaving and those colors within a maternal weaver is, in definition, the old ways in terms of what our ancestors would have seen. And this would explain why some families, twill weaving is only a maternal line of knowledge. Twill weaving is something that is a taboo style of weaving, that if you learn to weave it, it is so special that you don't let anyone else know about it and you use it for your own personal purposes. Twill weavings is ceremonial along the lines in those families, so it's not something you're supposed to do or use every day. And then those are just because of its visual styles. It represents reptiles, baseline with snakes, rattlesnakes, horned toads, and its protection. A lot of these are reptiles, and our taboos about that make twill weaving scary, or not scary, but to be feared within those families. With our tribe, and particularly with my family, we are utilitarian, adaptable people, and twill is so adaptable that it needs to be used in order to shield your feet from heat or cold, or insulate you in the winter, or create something that breathes. So twill has a realistic, tangible use in front of you. And despite all the different teachings, our family uses twill for those uses, whether it's blankets, belts, horse cinches. It has so many different uses, and I applaud people who use twill because they are still continuing those stories of even the knowledge that existed before we were an identifiable culture as the Nef people, before we took that job to be protectors of Mother Earth. And it acknowledges all of that, the history of twill. And then even in terms of actual timeline, it predates cotton, it predates even yucca string spinning. That's the last 5,000 years of history that's embodied in twill. And it is just an awesome, adaptable technique. And I really think it connects us to the actual Spider-Woman and Spider-Man that taught us this. And then it was emphasized with the Hero Twins experience with Spider-Woman and Spider-Man. And then again, when they met their father, the sun, and their minds were open to all these different ways of thinking and planning that's all embodied within twill. And that comes to line on like how you separate yourself from your weavings, because every family has that way of making a mistake. When you are the most perfect visual artist as a tapestry weaver, and you have this drive to make things so perfect, those are the weavers that make the visual, it's not a mistake, but they say spirit line, a visual disconnect from the perfect symmetry of their weaving. So in the past, when we did stripes, some of the weavers would put a piece of horsehair, a piece of colored yarn that wasn't part of the pattern, something that was opposite or contrasting to the nature of the textiles as their disconnect. And with me, I still have that in all of my art. It's just something that I keep in there that I only know. So when people look at it, unless they understand my process or me, they will never know. It's in there, but they're in there. And then sometimes it's just as easy as just getting one warp count off, and that's it. It's just that idea, when a weaving comes off the loom, it's no longer a child. It's a full-fledged adult able to survive on its own. So when we do that, the weaving will speak to someone or speak to whatever it's going to be, and it will leave the loom, its home, and go out in the world and fulfill its purpose.
I know you use a lot of natural wool. However, have you used commercial wool, and does it feel different?
Yes, it's different in the fact that it brings a level of uniformity in my art that isn't present when you process your own materials. You're trying to get uniformity from chaos, from what has happened in the lifetime of the sheep, what has happened the day that the shearer takes the wool off the sheep, what has happened to the wool on its way to when you clean it, when you spin it. You're trying to take all of that experience and turn it into this one idea that's in your mind to produce a textile. When you do a textile with commercial yarn, because of the way it's marketed and the way it's created, creates a uniformity that takes all of that equation out. To me, it creates a different textile. Not that it's bad, it's just different in its intent. So I use any materials. The thing about weaving is that you could weave with anything that can be drawn out in whatever length. It can be a monofilament of nylon. It could be metal. It could be just sticks. You can weave with anything. And modern materials just mean you are creating a new style of art that people will find beauty in, and that it will speak for itself when you create it. Whether it helps us in terms of survival, we'll be able to tell with time. So there's no prohibition against using modern material, and I think anyone and everyone should work with the original materials first and then add everything else as a supplement, because you'll find little things in your art along the way that you might need to know an old process to be able to find a way to create a modern material and a technique that is unique to what you create. It's just a new tool if you use modern materials.
What advice or words of encouragement would you have for future artists?
Be loud. Find your voice. Be that artist that pushes the art and your voice, your community and family to a place that makes us better as a people. To use art to equalize inequality, find equity, whether it's social, justice, economics. Your art is that tool, that weapon that we can use to make things better for us. As if you look in history, the hardest thing to realize is that we as a people, the Dine tribe, our culture, our language, we have never truly owned our history outside of what we tell each other at home. So it's so easy for us to forget things that happened 30 years ago, 40, 50, 100, 150 years ago, where the history that we publish and share is only stark shadows of a stereotype that are no longer representative of us as a culture. We need to own our story, we need to own our history, we need to own our art, and we need to use it to further our people. Otherwise, we're going to be in this constant cycle of repeating ourselves. Every time I hear a new political idea or an educational movement, I've lived long enough that I was a product of that. It kind of worked, but it didn't. And yet people are treating it like it's solving a new problem. We had 150 years of living in what most people would call poverty. Have we risen out of it? Do we live with it and we're proud of it? Because you can live in poverty and still have a happy life. But where do we want to go as a community when it comes to how we represent ourselves and the stories we tell? And it's through art. And this speaks to writers, visual artists, and weavers. Each one of these weavings behind me and my weavings is a textbook if you learn how to read its language. And sometimes you'll go over there to a weaving and it just speaks to you like the struggles of this one weaver, a history. And then you look at the weaving and it's already 200 years old. Those are things that we need to put for the next generation to give us an edge in surviving, that what we're doing now is a benefit for our people in the future. And right now there is a lot of problems. We have had these problems for 150 years, and we keep getting in this cycle. Here's a quote that I like to bring up that Dr. Annie Wanika herself responded to a question from an anthropologist. And the question was along the lines of, do you think Navajos can keep the old ways and still live in the 20th century? And her response was, she looked down and took a deep breath, looked at the camera and says, no, I don't think so. And you can take that out of context, that she didn't believe that old ways and new ways can exist. It's just that at that moment, she did not know the solution to the problem. And that's the problem we've been working on in the last 150 years. And just now have our writers and artists and weavers started to realize that we need to start owning this, that we need to start creating the solutions for the future. Even myself, I've gotten into that rut where the young generation constantly wants to learn, but when you teach them the ways to do it, they lose interest or they just leave. And it's really disheartening as a teacher, particularly with the things that I know about farming, some of the stories and the weaving. But these students and the teaching opportunities are renewed when they see my art, when they see me go in front of a group, an auditorium, and give a lecture as if I'm the expert for once. Be the expert. Be the Navajo. And use that to give us an edge for the future generations. What I do now with my weavings, I hope that in 800 years, there's still a fragment of my paintings or textile, and it's being read by someone who still understands weaving. You know, whether we are a technological society, if we adapt and we become everything that we've always written in sci-fi, or whether we retract and, become a quasi hunter-gatherer society. There's no wrong in either extremes. It's our ability to remain Navajo and adapt. And that was the amazing thing, I think, all what we call the holy people, Dee and Danette, gave us. That between our eyes and ears, our nose, our breathing, and our relationship with the wind, light, that there's a thing inside between all of that, in the absolute center of what you go to every time you make a thought or speak, is that today I will help my people, I will help myself, I will help my family. And that struggle to answer that question, ever since the first man and first woman came out of their home, is something that I hope art and the future generations will solve. I can only play a part of that solution. I don't think I will ever get to the answer in my lifetime where I still come up with the same answers as Dr. Annie Wanika. I don't think so. Does that mean I think it's impossible? No. It's through art and the youth that we will solve our problems together.